My name is Angelina Jackson. I'm 30 years old. My sister threw a party to celebrate kicking me out of the only home I'd ever known. There was a banner over the garage, hand-painted, red letters on white. Goodbye, freeloader. 31 people stood underneath it, holding beers, laughing. Victoria pointed at me and said, loud enough for all of them to hear, 30 years old and still just a cleaner. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I took out my phone and took one photo, not of her face, not of the crowd, of the banner, and the unopened letter sitting on the porch behind it. That letter had been there all morning. None of them had noticed it. I had. 2 weeks later, my sister sent me a text. Angelina, call me, I'm begging. This is what happened in between. I need to go back a little, not far, just far enough for you to understand what kind of family we were and what kind of person I'd spent 30 years trying to be inside of it. Our father died when I was 9 and Victoria was 13. After that, it was just the two of us and our mother, and then our mother remarried when I was 12 and slowly became someone else's wife more than she was our mother. I don't say that with bitterness, I say it as fact. She moved into his world, his rhythms, his priorities. Victoria and I were appendages that came with the package. The difference between Victoria and me was that Victoria learned early how to make herself central. She was louder, warmer in public, better at the specific performance of being the daughter people remembered. At family dinners, she sat in the middle of the table and told stories. I sat at the end and listened. I was in enough photographs to prove I existed, just barely. Our grandfather, Walter Hensley, was our mother's father. He was the one constant. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas Eve, every random Tuesday, when he'd drive 40 minutes to take us for pancakes without any particular reason. He was a quiet man. He didn't say much, but when he said something, it was worth hearing. The Tahoe house was his, a 4-bedroom on a wooded lot about 10 minutes from the South Shore. He'd bought it in his 40s, paid it off in his 60s, and by the time Victoria and I were adults, it had become the family anchor, the place we came back to, the place that felt, despite everything, like home. Walter let us both stay there. He never charged rent, and he never made us feel like tenants. Victoria moved in first, after her apartment lease ran out and before she'd figured out her next step. I moved in a year later, after I'd saved enough to start something. That something was Sterling Clean Commercial Services. I started it with $4,200 I'd kept in a savings account for 2 years, a laptop, a used cargo van, and a cleaning supplies contract with a distributor in Reno. My first client was a small accounting firm on the 4th floor of an office building downtown. $600 a month. I cleaned their floors and bathrooms every Tuesday and Thursday evening after hours alone. By year 2, I had 4 clients and 1 part-time employee. By year 4, I had 9 employees and 6 commercial contracts. By November 2025, Sterling Clean had just signed its largest contract to date, a 3-building portfolio in the Sparks corridor, 12 months, renewable. I hadn't told anyone in my family, not because I was hiding it exactly, more because they'd never asked, and I'd stopped expecting them to. The company name was on the side of my van. The logo was on the door of my small Reno office, navy blue lettering on frosted glass. My business card said Angelina Jackson, CEO and founder. I had 9 people working for me. My family thought I cleaned other people's bathrooms for a living. Victoria thought that was the whole story. She wasn't curious enough to find out otherwise. That's the thing about being underestimated by the people closest to you. After a while, you stop correcting them. Not out of strategy, just out of exhaustion. Our grandfather came to see my office once. He didn't announce it. He just showed up on a Thursday afternoon, knocked on the frosted glass door, and stood there in his green plaid shirt, holding a gas station coffee. I opened the door, and he looked past me at the room, the desk, the filing cabinets, the whiteboard with the crew schedule on it. And he nodded slowly. "You built this," he said. "Yeah," I said, "from scratch." "Pretty much." He sat in the plastic chair across from my desk and drank his coffee. We talked for about 40 minutes. He asked about the contracts, the margins, the employees, real questions, the kind that required real answers. When he left, he squeezed my shoulder at the door and said, "You're going to be fine, Angie. You always were." I didn't know, until much later, that he had made a decision that afternoon. Walter Hensley died in October 2025. A heart attack, quick and without warning, on a Wednesday morning. He was 74. The funeral was small. Our mother flew in from Phoenix. Aunt Diane, Walter's younger sister, drove up from Sacramento, a few of his old friends, some neighbors. Victoria cried in the front row, with her hand pressed to her chest, which is the version of grief that photographs well. I stood 2 seats away and held a white chrysanthemum, his favorite flower. And I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because my grief didn't have an audience and didn't need one. In my coat pocket was his handkerchief, green with white edging. I had picked it up off the side table at his house the day we went to collect a few things, and I hadn't been able to put it back down. I'd been carrying it since. 11 days after the funeral, I got a voicemail from a law office in Reno called Caldwell and Reeve. I didn't call back right away. I was managing a new crew on boarding that week, and I told myself I'd get to it. I assumed it was procedural, some document I needed to sign, something routine about the estate. I added it to my mental list and kept moving. That was a mistake I would correct soon enough. The invitation came on a Thursday. A text from Victoria. Family gathering Sunday at the house. Casual. Come by around 2. That was it. No details. I assumed it was something to do with Walter's estate. Going through his things, maybe, or a conversation about the house. Victoria didn't explain things in advance as a rule. Communication in my family moved in one direction. You found out what you needed to know when Victoria decided you needed to know it. I drove up Sunday morning and pulled onto the street around 1:50 p.m. That's when I saw the banner. I want to be precise about this moment because it matters. I was driving slowly, looking for parking, when I saw it stretched across the top of the garage. White butcher paper, roughly 8 feet long. Red letters, hand-painted, the kind of thing you make the night before when you want the gesture to feel spontaneous, but you've actually been planning it for days. Goodbye, freeloader. I parked 2 houses down. I sat in the car and counted to 90. I counted because I needed those 90 seconds. I needed to decide who I was going to be when I walked through that driveway. Whether I was going to give them the version of me that reacted, that raised her voice, that demanded an explanation, that handed them the scene they were probably expecting, or whether I was going to be something else entirely. At 90, I got out. The backyard was already full. 31 people, I counted later from the photo, spread across the lawn in clusters. 3 long folding tables with red checked tablecloths, a Weber grill going, smoke rising into the cold November air, a Bluetooth speaker on the patio playing country music at medium volume, bottles of Prosecco on the tables, paper plates, a tray of ribs. The temperature was 54 degrees. I stood at the edge of the driveway holding 2 bags I had packed the night before because Victoria had sent a follow-up text Friday evening. Bring your things. It's time for a clean break. I had read that text 3 times. Then I packed. Victoria was standing near the grill in a cream sundress and a denim jacket, a bottle of Prosecco in her hand. Garrison stood beside her, her fiancé, 41 years old, real estate attorney, perpetually composed in the way of a man who had learned that composure was its own form of authority. He was nodding at something someone was saying and not looking at me. I recognized most of the faces, cousins, family friends, the Abercrombies from next door, Mrs. Calloway from 2 streets over who had watched us after school once when I was 11. There were also people I didn't recognize. Colleagues of Victoria's, probably, friends of Garrison's, people who had been brought in to witness something. Nobody looked at me when I walked in. They were all watching Victoria. I found a spot at the edge of the patio near the sliding door and poured myself water from the pitcher on the side table. I checked the place cards at the 2 main tables. My name wasn't there. A white plastic lawn chair had been pushed to the far corner of the patio, slightly apart from everything else, like a last-minute thought. I stood instead. I was still standing when Victoria tapped her Prosecco bottle with her fingernail, and the crowd turned toward her. "Thank you all for being here," she said. Her voice had the particular warmth of someone who had rehearsed. "This is a meaningful day for our family. We've been through a lot this fall, losing Grandpa, and I think it's important that we come together and look forward." She paused. She had good timing. Part of looking forward is being honest, and part of being honest is acknowledging when things need to change. She turned and looked at me, not quickly. She held it long enough for everyone else to turn and look at me too. "Angelina has been living here for 4 years," she said. 4 years, and in that time she hasn't contributed meaningfully to the household. She runs a small cleaning operation. And I say this with love, which is not exactly building something. She's 30 years old. I think we all agree that at 30, it's time to figure out your life. Someone in the crowd made a sound that was almost a laugh. I held my glass of water with both hands and said nothing. This house deserves someone who actually invests in it, Victoria continued. Someone who shows up. Grandpa always talked about accountability, about everyone pulling their weight. He would have wanted this. There it was, she used his name. She dressed herself in his values like a borrowed coat and stood in front of his house and said he would have wanted this. That was the only moment in that entire afternoon where I felt something shift behind my eyes. Just one moment, then it settled. I looked at her for a second longer than was comfortable. Then I looked towards the front of the house. I told myself I needed my jacket. I went inside through the front door, down the hallway, past the row of family photographs on the wall. The ones where I was always slightly out of frame. Past the kitchen, past the room that had been mine for 4 years. On my way back to the front door, I stepped onto the porch, and there it was. Navy blue envelope, cream-colored paper visible at the corner where it had bent slightly in the cold. Return address in gold embossed lettering, Caldwell and Reeve, Attorneys at Law, Reno, Nevada. In the addressee line, Ms. Angelina Jackson, personal and confidential, not Victoria, not the family estate, not the household, me. In the lower left corner of the envelope, a red stamp, urgent, time sensitive. I stood there for 4 seconds. Then I set the envelope back exactly where it had been, same angle, same position, and walked back outside. Victoria was wrapping up when I returned. Fresh starts, moving forward. The best thing for everyone. She raised her glass, so it's goodbye and good luck. A few people clapped. Garrison gave a small approving nod. 2 people near the back laughed. I was already reaching for my phone. I raised it. I didn't do it quickly or secretly. I framed the shot deliberately. The banner, the crowd beneath it, Victoria mid-toast with her Prosecco, and in the lower right corner of the frame, just at the edge of visible, the front porch and the navy envelope sitting on the step. The shutter sound was small, but in that brief moment of near silence after the applause, a few people heard it. A few people glanced at each other. I lowered my phone, picked up my 2 bags, started walking toward my car. At the corner of the patio, I felt a light touch on my arm. Aunt Diane, she was 71 years old, and she had her brother's eyes. She didn't say a word, she just looked at me, and there was something in that look I couldn't name exactly. Not pity, not apology. Something closer to, I know what's coming, keep going. I nodded once, barely perceptibly, and kept walking. I got to my car, sat down, closed the door, opened the photo, zoomed into the lower right corner. The return address was clear enough to read. Caldwell and Reeve. The November light was going amber over the water. I could hear the music from the party 2 houses back. The bass carrying through the cold air like it didn't know the afternoon had already changed. I found the number in my call log. It was 6:17 p.m. when I dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. She confirmed my name, asked for my date of birth, verified both against whatever she had on her screen. Ms. Jackson, she said, Mr. Reeve has been trying to reach you. It's regarding the estate of Walter Hensley. It's time sensitive. I can come in Monday, I said. 9 a.m. works perfectly. A pause. The sound of a keyboard. Then, please bring a valid photo ID and... Another brief pause. Congratulations may be in order. She hung up. I set the phone down on the passenger seat. For the first time since I'd pulled onto that street, I took a full breath. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in Reno that weekend. $1,150 a month. 3rd floor, east-facing window. My friend Colton helped me move. He drove his truck, I drove mine. 4 boxes and a mattress and a desk. 1 box was sterling clean files. 1 was books. Nothing from the Tahoe house except the clothes I'd packed. Colton didn't ask many questions. That's one of the things I've always counted on him for. The particular intelligence of knowing when someone needs to be helped rather than interrogated. We set up the bed, we ordered pizza, we watched 3 hours of television without talking about anything that mattered, and then he went home, and I lay in the dark listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a building I didn't know yet. Victoria called while we were still unloading boxes. I watched the screen light up, put it face down on the dashboard. She called again that evening, and once more the next morning. I went to work. Sterling Clean was mid-onboarding for the Sparks Corridor contract, and I had a crew briefing at 7 a.m. I stood at the whiteboard in my office and walked through the new protocols with my team. I looked at the Sterling Clean logo on the frosted glass door, navy blue lettering, and I felt for the first time in days like I was standing on solid ground. After the briefing, I drove downtown. The offices of Caldwell and Reeve were on the 14th floor. The lobby had the particular quiet of serious business. Carpeted floors, low lighting, a receptionist who spoke in measured tones as though she had been trained specifically in the management of emotionally weighted appointments. Aunt Diane was already there when I arrived, sitting near the window in her navy coat. She was holding a coffee from the corner machine, and she looked like she had slept well, which I found oddly reassuring. We looked at each other. "You knew," I said. "Walter told me," she said, 6 weeks before he died. "He wanted me to know in case you needed someone here." I sat down next to her. Patrick Reeve came in 8 minutes later. 58 years old, gray suit, gold-framed glasses worn slightly low on his nose. The look of a man who reads carefully and remembers everything. He set a thick file on the conference table, 23 pages, yellow-tabbed at several sections, and sat down across from us. "Ms. Jackson," he said, "your grandfather was a very deliberate man. Everything in this document reflects months of careful thought. I want you to understand that before we begin." I nodded. "Has your sister been notified?" he asked. Diane answered before I could. "She has. She's receiving her portion by separate correspondence." Patrick Reeve opened the file. He read without theater. The Tahoe property, the 4-bedroom house on the wooded lot, currently assessed at approximately $890,000, was to be transferred in full to Angelina Marie Jackson. The liquid assets in Walter Hensley's personal accounts, $410,000, likewise designated to Angelina Marie Jackson, to be transferred within 30 business days of probate clearance. The Hensley Family Trust, comprising various long-term investment instruments accumulated over 30 years, 60% of which was designated to Angelina Marie Jackson. He read the numbers slowly. $410,000, each word its own weight. Diane had her hand on mine. Patrick continued. Victoria Jackson was designated as beneficiary of $15,000 from the estate's secondary checking account, and of the mice and porcelain set that had belonged to Walter's late wife. Then he paused and looked up. "There is one more item," he said. "It is not a financial asset." He turned to a section near the back of the file, also yellow-tabbed, but this page had a different quality. The language changed. "Mr. Hensley included a statement of intent," Patrick said. "Unusual in a will, but entirely legal and contextually enforceable. I'll read it as written." He cleared his throat. "I, Walter James Hensley, make the above designations not arbitrarily, but after considerable observation and reflection. My granddaughter Angelina has, without assistance or public acknowledgement, built a functioning business from personal savings and sustained effort. I visited her place of work in the fall of this year and found it to be a real operation run by a capable person. I have observed Angelina build something from her own hands. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything I ever hoped for. My granddaughter Victoria has received substantial financial support from various family members over the years and has had opportunity. The distribution above reflects my assessment of demonstrated character, not preference." Patrick closed that section. I was looking at the table, not out of shame, but because the room had gone very still, and I needed somewhere to put my eyes that wasn't Diane's face, which was doing something I wasn't ready to look at directly. He had written it into the legal document, not as sentiment, as a record. Walter Hensley had wanted it formally, legally, permanently documented that he had seen me, that he had looked at what I built and called it real, that he had a reason and he had written it down, and now it would exist in that file for as long as files exist. Patrick let the silence hold for a moment. Then he reached into the drawer to his right and produced a small envelope, cream-colored paper, my name on the front in blue ink, handwriting I recognized immediately, slightly unsteady at the ends of each letter but still clear, still his. To Angelina, open alone. "Mr. Hensley asked that this not be read aloud," Patrick said quietly. It was sealed in front of 2 witnesses 6 weeks before he passed. He slid it across the table. I picked it up. The paper was heavier than I expected. The seal on the back was intact. I put it carefully in my bag. Diane looked at me. I looked back at her. We didn't need words for it. I drove back to Reno with the envelope on the passenger seat. The whole 40 minutes, I didn't touch it. I parked, went upstairs, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. The afternoon light came through the east window and lay flat across the table. Outside, Reno moved at its usual pace. Traffic, distance, ordinary life. I told myself I'd open it when I was ready. I wasn't ready yet. That afternoon, a FedEx truck pulled up to the Tahoe house. I know this because of what followed. At 10:23 a.m., the next Tuesday, my phone lit up with Victoria's name. I watched it ring. She called again at 10:41. At 11:02, a text arrived. This is a mistake. Call me now. I put the phone face down. She called 4 more times that day. The voicemails went unheard. That evening, another text. Angelina, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't right. Grandpa would never have wanted this. Call me. I read it, didn't respond. The next day brought 3 more calls and a longer message. Something about how she had always been the one who showed up, who managed things, who was actually present for the family. I read that one slowly. I thought about the specific facts I could cite, the years, the hours, the silence I had kept while she performed. I thought about all of it. Then I set the phone down and went back to the cruise schedule on my laptop. The family group chat went quiet around day 3. The last message in it was from Victoria. Grandpa would have wanted us to be together through this. Nobody replied. Aunt Diane called Thursday evening. She said she had spoken to a few of the family members who had been at the BBQ. She wasn't specific about what she'd told them. She just said, "People are starting to understand the whole picture, Angelina. Your grandfather always knew. He always did." The following Saturday morning, I got a text from a cousin named Renata. Mid-40s, one of the people I'd watched nod along during Victoria's speech at the party. Angie, I didn't know the full story. I'm sorry for what I did, for not saying anything. I read it 3 times. The apology felt real. I could tell she meant it. But it arrived after the documents were public, after the information had spread, after the situation had clarified itself for everyone watching. I didn't know what to do with an apology that came that late. Not because I doubted it, but because I wasn't sure yet what I needed from any of these people. I left it on read at 3:41 p.m. That night, Victoria sent her 11th text at 11:47 p.m. The first 10 had moved through stages the way panic does. Denial, then anger, then long justifications, then bargaining, then something that read like despair. Each phase had lasted a few days. I read all of them. I responded to none. The 11th was different. Angelina, call me, I'm begging. No argument. No appeal to family or to what Walter would have wanted or to the fundamental injustice of the situation as she saw it. Just that. I showed it to Colton the next evening. He read through all 11 texts in order. He set my phone down on the table without commenting on any specific message. He looked at me. What do you want to do? He said. Not what are you going to do. What do you want to do? I don't know yet, I said. You don't have to know yet, he said. We sat at my small kitchen table with 2 mugs of tea going cold and the lights turned low. Outside, the street was quiet. There's a letter, I said, from Grandpa. I haven't opened it. Colton looked at me for a moment. Then he picked up his mug and said nothing, which was exactly the right thing. I went to the bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, took the envelope out. 3 pages, cream paper, blue ink. I'd been moving it from my bag to that drawer for 11 days, looking at it in the morning, putting it away again. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe for the noise to get quiet enough that I could actually hear him. The noise had gotten quiet. I carried the envelope back to the table and set it down. Colton glanced at it once, then back at his tea. I slid my thumb under the seal. 3 pages, written on his personal stationery, cream paper with his initials at the top in small navy type, the kind of stationery that comes in a proper box and gets used only for things that matter. The handwriting was his, slightly unsteady at the end of each stroke, the tremor that had gotten worse in his last 2 years, but still clear, still him. He started. Angelina, if you're reading this, I wasn't able to say it in person. I'm sorry for that. The first page was about the afternoon he came to Sterling Clean. He described the drive over, finding parking on the street, knocking on the frosted glass. He described what he saw when I opened the door: the whiteboard with the crew schedule, the filing cabinets, the compliance folders stacked on the shelf. He described sitting in the plastic chair while I walked him through the active contracts. Then he wrote, "You were explaining something to one of your employees when I arrived. A new hire. You were showing her how to mix the cleaning solution properly. The ratios, the safety protocol. You were patient. You didn't rush her. You treated her like the work mattered, which told me everything about how you ran things. And then I sat in that chair and I thought, this is a person who understands the value of what she's doing. Not just the money, the work itself, the people doing it. Then, you didn't know I was watching. That's how I knew it was real." I put the first page down and picked up the second. He wrote about a night when I was 16, a holiday dinner, one of the tense ones. Everyone performing a version of togetherness while the real tensions hummed underneath. Someone had made a comparison, the way they always did. Victoria's trajectory versus mine. My vague lack of a plan. The familiar measuring. I don't remember exactly what was said that night. I remember the weight of it. I remember going outside afterward, to the backyard of the Tahoe house, the cold air and the sky full of stars, and Walter following me out, standing a step behind me without saying anything right away. He wrote, "You said," and I want to get this exactly right because I've thought about it many times since. "You said, Grandpa, I don't need them to think I'm worth something. I just need to know it myself. You were 16 years old." I went back inside and didn't say a word to anyone about what you'd just told me, but I have carried it since. That was the day I stopped worrying about you. I set the second page down. I looked at the far wall of my kitchen for a moment. I didn't remember saying those words, but I remembered the night, the cold air, the tiredness of being found insufficient by people who weren't really looking. I remembered standing out there and Walter coming to stand nearby. I hadn't remembered the conversation specifically. He had remembered it for 14 years. He had held on to it quietly, the way he held on to most things, and he had let it matter to him without telling me it did. Until now. I picked up the third page. "I owe you one apology. Not for the will is what it is, and I stand behind every word of it. My apology is for the years I watched you stand at the edges of things and didn't say loudly enough that you belonged at the center. I was a quiet man. I believed my actions would speak for themselves. I thought you knew. Maybe you did, but you deserved to hear it while I was still here to say it. That's my failure, not yours. You should not have had to carry the uncertainty of that alone." And then at the bottom of the third page, in handwriting that was slightly more unsteady than the rest, as though he had written this part last, or it had cost him something to write it. "You have always been exactly enough. I need you to know that. Not because of the business or the money or anything that can be counted. Just you, exactly as you are. With love always, Grandpa Walter." I folded the third page. I sat with it. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, Reno moved at its night pace. Distant traffic, a siren somewhere far off, ordinary sounds that had nothing to do with any of this. The apology in that letter wasn't about the banner or the speech or the 31 people in the backyard. He didn't know about any of that. His apology was older and quieter and more specific than any of that. He was apologizing for every year he had watched and said nothing while I stood at the edge of things, and in doing so he was also telling me, "I saw you, the whole time. I saw you. I just ran out of time to say it louder." That was the sentence that went through. Not the house, not the $410,000, not the legal language in a 23-page document that now permanently recorded his assessment of my character. You should not have had to carry the uncertainty of that alone. I sat very still for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Aunt Diane. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did, as though she had been expecting it. "I read it," I said, a pause. "I know," she said, quietly, like she'd been waiting to say it. "He saw me," I said. "He always did," she said. "He just ran out of time to say it louder. His words, almost exactly. He told me the same thing when he showed me the letter. We talked for a while. I'm not sure how long. At some point she told me that Walter had mentioned my office more than once over the years. That he talked about it the way you talk about something you're proud of but haven't figured out how to bring into a conversation without it seeming like you're making a point. I said, he should have made the point. She laughed, low and tired. He should have. He knew it too at the end. After we hung up, I sat at the table until nearly midnight. Then I opened my texts and scrolled to Victoria's name. I looked at the last 11 messages without reading them again. Then I typed, Victoria, I'm not angry. I'm done. There's a difference. Don't contact me for a while. I sent it. Her read receipt came up in 40 seconds. No response. I turned off the screen, and for the first time since that Sunday afternoon in the Tahoe driveway, I slept through the night. Victoria reached out one more time, 10 days later. She asked to meet. A coffee shop, somewhere neutral, not her place or mine. I agreed because I wanted to close the loop on my own terms, not hers. She was already there when I arrived. She looked tired in a specific way, the kind of tired that comes not from lack of sleep, but from the sustained effort of holding a version of events together that the actual events keep contradicting. She talked for most of the 18 minutes we were there. She explained. She justified. She described her understanding of the situation and how it had developed. She mentioned Grandpa several times, and each time she did, I noticed that she still reached for his memory like a resource, something to borrow authority from, rather than as something she'd actually lost. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I said, I heard you. I'm not going to argue with any of it, but I need you to understand something. I'm not deciding what I do next based on what you need from me. That time is over. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, Are we done? Like, completely? I didn't answer that question. I left enough on the table to cover both coffees, stood up, put on my coat, and walked out. Aunt Diane came to Reno the following Friday. Colton made pasta, which he will tell you was good, and which was, in fact, mediocre, but nobody said anything because it was warm and there was decent wine, and the three of us sat around my small kitchen table with the door cracked open and the night air coming in. And at some point we stopped talking about anything heavy and just talked. Colton made a joke about the pasta. Diane laughed. A real laugh, the unguarded kind. I laughed too. I hadn't laughed like that in a while. It was a small thing, but it felt like something landing after a long time in the air. At the end of the night, Diane lifted her glass. To Walter, she said. Colton lifted his. I lifted mine. To Walter, we said. A beat of quiet. Then we finished our wine. It's December now. I still run Sterling Clean. 9 employees, expanding contracts, the Sparks Corridor portfolio in its second month. I go to the office early most mornings. I make the same coffee. I look at the same logo on the frosted glass door. The Tahoe house is mine on paper. I haven't moved back in. I'm not sure yet what I want to do with it, whether I'll live there eventually, rent it, keep it for the specific reason that it was his, and I want it to stay in a family that actually appreciated him. I haven't decided. For now, it sits. Walter's handkerchief, green with white edging, is in the front pocket of the jacket I wear most often. I put it there after I read the letter, and I've left it there since. I don't think about it constantly. Some mornings I reach into my pocket and feel it, and that's enough. I went to the house once in December, drove up alone on a Tuesday, no plan, just pulled off the highway and took the familiar roads. I parked in the driveway and stood outside for a while in the cold. I didn't go in. I looked at the garage where the banner had been. Someone had taken it down. I don't know who, and I didn't care particularly. I looked at the porch where the envelope had sat all morning while 31 people ate ribs and celebrated under the wrong assumption. I looked at the lake through the trees, the winter light coming flat and clean off the water. I thought about what he wrote. You have always been exactly enough, not because of the business or the money or anything that can be counted. Just you, exactly as you are. The thing about being the person in the family who gets overlooked is that after a while, you develop a complicated relationship with your own worth. You either collapse under it or you build something else to stand on. I built Sterling Clean. I built it alone, without acknowledgement, without anyone asking how it was going or showing up to see what I'd made. Except for one person, one Thursday afternoon, who drove 40 minutes and sat in a plastic chair and asked real questions and said you built this like it was the most natural fact in the world. He didn't save me. What he did was confirm something I had been carrying alone for a long time. Something I had told myself at 16 in a backyard while the stars came out over the lake and the party inside continued without noticing I was gone. I don't need them to think I'm worth something. I just need to know it myself. I stood at the end of the driveway for a while in the December cold, hands in my pockets, the handkerchief against my fingers. Then I got back in my car. I had a crew meeting at 8 the next morning, a contract renewal call at 10, 3 estimates to send by end of week. I had a life to get back to. And, for the first time in a long time, I didn't need anyone's permission to live it. The week before Christmas, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of reviewing the Sparks Corridor invoices, and my second coffee was going cold, and I had 3 things open on my laptop that all needed attention, but something made me pick up. "Is this Angelina Jackson?" A man's voice, measured, unhurried. "It is," I said. "My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm a senior partner at Whitmore & Associates in Sacramento. I handle commercial real estate transactions, primarily in the Northern California and Nevada corridor." A pause. "I was given your name by Diane Hensley." I set down my pen. "She mentioned you might be interested in a conversation," he said, "about the Tahoe property and potentially about other things." I leaned back in my chair. Through the frosted glass door of my office, I could see one of my crew leads crossing the parking lot in his sterling clean jacket. Navy blue, white lettering, the same colors I'd chosen 4 years ago, because they looked serious, and I wanted people to take me seriously. "What kind of other things?" I said. "Ms. Hensley tells me you run a commercial cleaning operation, solid contracts, good retention, growing portfolio." Another pause. "I manage several properties in the Reno-Tahoe area that have been looking for a reliable facilities services partner for some time. The previous vendor was terminated in October for quality issues. We've been operating month to month with a stopgap since then." I picked up my pen again, turned it over in my fingers. "How many properties?" I said. 8, he said. "Potentially 11 by Q2. I wrote the number on the corner of my notepad. Just the number. 8. "I'd like to sit down with you in January," Gerald Whitmore said. "If you're interested." "I'm interested," I said. I hung up and sat for a moment looking at the number on the notepad. 8 properties. Potentially 11. That was, if structured correctly, somewhere between a significant expansion and a transformation of what Sterling Clean could become. Aunt Diane had done that. She hadn't told me she was going to. She hadn't asked if I wanted her to. She had simply, quietly, in the background, in the way that people who actually love you operate, opened a door. I thought about what Walter had written. I was a quiet man. I believed my actions would speak for themselves. It ran in the family, apparently. I smiled at the notepad for a moment. Then I closed the invoice file and opened a new document and started drafting talking points for a January meeting. Victoria sent one more message in December. Not a call. A text, short, sent on a Sunday evening when the light was already gone and the Reno streets were quiet. "I've been thinking. I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know that I understand now what I didn't understand then. I'm not asking for anything back. I just needed to say it." I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the coffee table and watched the rest of the movie I had been watching, because I had learned, by then, that not every message requires an immediate answer. Some things need to sit. Some things you come back to when you have more clarity about what you actually feel, rather than what you think you should feel. What I actually felt was complicated. Not softened exactly, not hardened either. Something more textured than either of those. The way you feel when someone who hurt you badly finally says the true thing, and the true thing is real, and it still doesn't fix the years before it. Both things exist at the same time. I've stopped pretending they don't. I didn't respond that night. I didn't respond for several days. When I finally did, it was brief. "I hear you. I'm not ready for more than that yet. Maybe someday. Not now." She read it within minutes. She didn't reply. That was the right answer from both of us. I went back to the Tahoe house one more time before the year ended. December 28th. The roads were clear, the sky was the specific white of high winter, and I drove up with no plan except to be there. I had a key in my pocket, my own key, the one Walter had given me years ago, that I'd kept on my ring even after the BBQ because it was mine and nobody had actually asked for it back. I let myself in the front door. The house was cold. Nobody had been running the heat. I turned on the hallway light and stood for a moment just inside the entrance, looking at the row of family photographs on the wall. I had looked at this wall my entire life and always seen the same thing. Victoria centered, my mother nearby, myself at the edge or slightly behind someone's shoulder. The visual record of a family that had, without really meaning to, arranged itself according to an informal hierarchy that everyone understood and nobody discussed. I looked at the photographs now and felt something different than I was used to feeling. Not anger, not vindication, just clarity. These photographs were taken by people who were pointing the camera at what they valued most. They didn't know they were making an argument. They thought they were taking pictures. But the arrangement tells you everything about what a family unconsciously believes, and looking at it now, I could see it plainly for what it was. A habit, not a verdict. A habit can be interrupted. I walked through the house slowly. The living room with Walter's old armchair still in the corner by the window, the one he always sat in when we watched football, the one with the worn patch on the right armrest, where he rested his hand, the kitchen with its view of the backyard and the trees, the hallway that led to the bedrooms. I stopped at the door of the room that had been mine. I opened it. It was empty. Victoria had removed the few things that weren't mine. The furniture that came with the house was still there, the bed frame, the dresser, the small desk under the window. My things were in a Reno apartment, but the room was still unmistakably recognizable. I stood in the doorway for a while. I thought about the girl who had moved into this room 4 years ago with 2 suitcases and a van full of cleaning supplies and a number in a savings account that she'd been protecting for 2 years against every impulse to spend it. Who had woken up in this room before 5 a.m. more times than she could count? Who had driven to Reno in the dark and back in the dark and stood in the quiet of someone else's office building after hours and done the work and driven home and done it again? Who had never once, in this room or any other room in this house, been asked how it was going, and who had kept going anyway? I didn't cry. I had done whatever I needed to do with that long before I stood in that doorway. What I felt instead was something quieter and more durable, a kind of settling, the feeling of a thing finally being named correctly after years of being called something else. I closed the door gently and walked back down the hallway. In the living room, I stopped at Walter's armchair. I put my hand on the worn patch on the right armrest, the way his hand had rested there so many times I'd stopped counting. The fabric was cold. The room was cold. Outside, through the window, the trees were bare against the white sky, and the lake was the flat gray of December. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the armrest. "I got the letter," I said, to no one and to him. "I'm okay." The house didn't answer. Houses don't. But there was something in the quality of the silence that felt less like absence than like completion, like a sentence that had been left unfinished for a long time, had finally found its period. I turned off the hallway light. I locked the front door with my key. I walked to my car, and I drove back toward Reno, toward my office and my crew, and the January meeting I was already preparing for, toward the work that had always been mine and the life I had built quietly and without permission, under a banner I would never need to hang over any garage, because what I had made didn't require an announcement. It only required showing up, every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and then every day after that. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've ever been the person standing at the edge of a room that should have been yours, or the one whose name got left off the list, or the one who built something real while someone else got credit for existing, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. What would you have done with that letter? What would it have meant to you? And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I'll see you in the next one.